My name is. I'm joined by my friends Elian and Seth to demonstrate what we all created together, which is a TBD Banking Application. We'll be going over the methodologies and technologies we use in its development and the shifting team structure, as well as some of the planning documentation before performing a live demonstration of the application itself. So in this project, we use the Agile Scrum methodology to guide our development process. This included using a Trello Kanban board, which you see now, to track the progress of various site features, as well as we use daily stand-up meetings to stay up to date with each other on the status of the project and to move different features we were working on around the Kanban board based on how complete we thought they were at the time. Here you can see the Trello at some point mid-development, where we have backlogs and features in progress, those that are up for review, and any features that we agreed were completed. So next we'll go over the team setup. As far as team structure, we initially had 2 groups of 3, each with their own team leader. However, there was a restructuring that resulted in some changes to both teams. I lost members of my group, 2 members, so all of them, and ended up joining Elian and Seth's team after they lost their team lead. So despite that shuffling, we were able to work together pretty effectively and overcome all the challenges that arose from it. I'm especially grateful to the great project planning and documentation that they had already set up. So as well as those daily stand-up meetings where they were able to answer a lot of my questions and how I was supposed to pick up code that their previous leader had left off kind of midway. They both would probably argue that we all worked on a more even playing field as 3 developers working together. But in my view, they both acted as like competent leaders when it came to those issues that I was bumping into. And since I made the slide myself, I set them up as team lead 1 and team lead A. Their guidance in the last weeks was a real game changer for me. So thanks to both of you. And now I get to show off some of that useful planning documentation that helped me out to begin with. So this slide contains the flowchart that they had that shows the planned user experience for the site. The orange boxes represent a lot of those front-end components that we plan to build. And the blue boxes are different conditional statements that would kind of determine the route the website would take at any given time. So for example, things like, okay, we'll start them off on the landing page. If the user's registered, we'll let them open up a modal to log into that account. And if they're not registered, we'll let them open up a different modal to register a user. It's got a lot of that kind of detail and enough to help a new dev like me understand how the team wanted the user experience to flow. Next, I'll show you the website wireframing quick. This slide shows some of the wireframing that they had set up, which represents kind of how we plan for the site to look in the end. And when I joined the team, like I said, this information was already available to me, and you can imagine how helpful that kind of thing is. It was probably the most helpful documentation for joining a new team and diving into already established code. They had this nice light mode and dark mode already set up, and they went out of their way to model the whole thing on a website called Figma that allowed us to have like the shared ideal end goal while we're designing the front end. So let's go over the backend ERD now. This slide contains the entity relationship diagram that shows how we built the database for the backend of our project. In my previous team, before we learned Spring, I actually started project 2 by writing like hundreds of lines of SQL script to create tables and alter them, add different foreign keys and whatnot, and insert dummy data. But I ended up losing all that work, but definitely gained something better in the process. You see Seth use Spring Boot to create the tables and columns automatically based on models that he wrote up. And this allowed for a lot of the database control to be handed over to Spring, as far as like accessing different data that we need throughout the website. And we've got our user table here, the accounts. Each account is tied to their transactions, and it's all tied together with limitations on like the types of transactions you can have and the types of accounts you can make. The models that Seth built had these one-to-many and many-to-one annotations that were super useful in specifying like strict rules on how we set it up and how it all came together nicely. But now I'll pass it over to Seth to continue the presentation.
I think you may end me, but I'll take it.
Oh, sorry.
So,
Elian,
yeah, we can go to the next slide where we start talking about some of the technologies that we used. Hi, everybody. My name is Elian Felix, and I'll talk a little bit about what technologies we used. So our main stack was Node and Angular for our front end, with a little bit of assistance from Bootstrap and a library called Materials for specific for Angular, which allows you to have some pre-configured, very nice styled components that are like ready to use, already configured. On the back end, we use Java, of course, with Spring Boot framework on top. And we used, for our database, we use PostgreSQL. And, a couple, in the backend specifically, we added a couple of dependencies to be able to handle JWT authentication and to be able to auto-generate data for, our demoing process. So we don't have to, it facilitates the presentation. So if we go to next slide. Specifically for our branching, our idea was to keep it as modular as possible. So, I personally think that like having the front end and the back end on one single repo would be pretty messy. And as you can see from screenshots of our history, even having the front end and the back end, the difference, like it was a long list, so it can get pretty messy. And for our branching process, it was pretty much, we tried to keep it, so everybody's working on their own branch. And we only merge to main. We only ever merge to main when we have a working feature or a working component that we want to add that it's already working. It's not going to break anything in the main. And that was for both for the front end and any endpoints that we're making on the back end. And if we go to the next slide, here we can see most of the main features that we implemented in our application, basic things like having a header with a navigation, having a little bit of a footer that has, some of the contact information, the links that you would want to have on a professional website. We implemented a dark mode switch to be able to switch teams, be able to register, log in, all that good stuff regarding user account, and then elements regarding being able to see your accounts, send money, request money, get notifications, and on kind of like underneath, implementing the JSON web tokens to be able to authenticate while keeping state on the server. It just facilitates things a lot. And yeah, I think that covers it. So moving on to next slide. Like AJ mentioned already, we had some issues with team restructuring, like that was pretty interesting right in the middle of the planning of the project. Definitely good experience to have for the future. Spring Security, personally for me, since I was the one implementing the security parts of things and handling the authentication, we decided to use Spring 6. And they recently did a change on how they do security. And it was a little bit tough finding documentation on how to actually implement it. I spent a good couple of days learning that. So. And I'm sure Seth will be explaining a little bit of the challenges that he had implementing the accounts and the transfers. And yeah, I'll open the floor for him to start the demonstration.
Hello, Seth Evry. So for the challenges faced with the account balance specifically, the way we have creating a transfer, it's a child root of our accounts page. So when the child root pops up in a modal and disappears, as we'll show in a minute, it does not like reinitialize or destroy the accounts balance page. So it needed a method to refresh the balances so they dynamically change when you close the create transfer window. And I'll go through and show a little bit about the project now. So as we said before, there's a dark theme that we can use. And then we can also register a user like Bob, with the name Bob and last name Bob. Some password. And when it registers, we get a little bar here saying the user is registered. And then we can log in. And if we log in incorrectly, it validates like that and says it's, well, if we log in incorrectly, it says we have a wrong username and password. We can log in, create the user. User starts out with no accounts, so we can create an account. Checking account, you start out with an initial balance. Normally in a bank, you would probably bring cash or something to a clerk to initialize your bank account as the initial balance. But in our case, we just put in the number to start the balance. So I make an account, and the account appears here, and I can make a second account. So a savings account. I'm unmuted, right? It's okay. And then I could choose which account it comes from and which account it's going to, and choose an amount. And then it refreshes over here. And I could check and see that the transaction was added. And I could check the transaction details, the transaction is complete. It gives me the transaction date. And then I can also go to my user profile and edit that. Update, it says update profile. So now that my first name is Bob with the capital B. Additionally, we can request or send money to other users. We choose which account to send it from, and send money, let's say $5,000, and then we have to have the other user's username. We have a tool that runs when we start the server for testing purposes. It auto-populates our database with some users and their accounts. So I can make the request, it's a success, and I'll send it over to that user. I'll make a second one. This time I'll ask for some money for the same person. All right, now I can log out and log into this user. And they have the two accounts, and they also now have two notifications up here, which we can look at. So money sent from Bob, and when I check on that, it goes down to one notification and marks it as red, and I cannot delete the notification while the request is still pending. He sent an amount of $5,000. I accept. It gives me a drop down where I can choose which account it gets sent to, and when I submit, it gets added to the account, and I can now delete that notification. And if I go and look at the other notification, hit deny, I deny the notification. And if I try to view a notification, it's already been processed, it tells me, and I can now delete that. And of course, if I go and I check the account, the transaction popped up. And that should be about it for the demonstration. Oh, actually, there's a little more. I can change the amount of entries on a page and sort through the pages, and then I can also sort between income and expense in the accounts. And now that's about it.
We didn't have too many defects or challenges that we didn't resolve before project day, but we did have a backlog still of items that we wanted to implement if we had more time. So here's a couple of them. We wanted to send email alerts to users. A budget calculator was an option that we were thinking of. Loan applications that would require having a separate user type of an admin versus a normal user. We want the alert that you saw come up when someone was sending or receiving money. We want the logged in user to know that someone accepted or denied their request / what they sent them. And finally, we wanted a monthly account statement PDF to be able to be printed straight from the website itself. And if that's all, I believe we're open to questions.
Okay, well, starting off, guys, congratulations on the presentations. So let me start with my first question. So regarding monthly account statements PDF, how would you guys propose to implement a feature like that?
Well, I'll go ahead. Since we're using Spring, Spring already has a sub framework that is, I believe, is like Spring messaging that has classes that allow you to take data from the database or the persistence layer and kind of format them as a PDF. File. It's like there's a way of exporting data from the persistence layer to a PDF file. It could be something else, like also like an Excel or a CB comma separated file or something like that if you wanted to introduce it into another software. But for our case, since we're kind of trying to model a bank, it made sense to make it a PDF that is not editable, so that users can see their, can like keep their account information month to month and be able to track their expenses or whatever, but not be able to edit it, basically.
Okay. All right. Could you also, I believe it was Seth, would you be able to show me your application actually? Switch over from the PowerPoint slide to the app.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, to the website specifically. So with regards to, well, let's see, can you go over, select the transaction or select a transaction to get more details about it? So would you ever get a status other than complete?
Yes, it's not in our case specifically, but sometimes if there's a credit or something at a real bank, the status might be processing or something for a day or two.
Okay. And I see that the type is PayPal. Is that just a placeholder?
Yeah, that's just a placeholder.
Okay.
There's a few different types it could be, and it's for filling our database, it just switches through the random different types that we have.
Okay, I see. Can I verify? So, regards to sending money over, can you send negative money over?
No, you can't. Let me go back to the accounts page. I have a validator. Let's say negative 500. It says invalid amount right now.
Yeah.
It also verifies that if you're sending money, that the amount does not surpass the balance as well.
I see. And how were you able to implement dark mode and light mode?
So for dark mode and light mode, it was mostly CSS. There's a data theme, like you can set an attribute to something and then you can select the attribute. And I used CSS variables for different colors for the light theme, and then I changed them when it got to the dark theme, and then I just used the variables in every component.
Okay.
And
right.
when you
I see. And actually, I saw that you guys were including Spring Security. So what exact, what advantages did you guys get from using Spring Security over, let's just say plainly using JWTs or even sessions?
I'll go ahead and take that question. So the idea was to automate the JWT generation and afterward the authentication itself. Specifically, Spring Security uses these things called, I believe it's security filters, which they intercept requests and verify that first that whatever authentication you're using is valid, and whether you can access or have the role or access to that specific route. And depending on the result, it can either let you go through with that request or deny you right away. And it's a way to let Spring manage that for you, as long as you properly configure it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Well, in that case, well, I guess that's all the questions I have for you guys.
While we're on this page too, I wanted to highlight one of the features. When you try to transfer money to accounts, it actually grays out the account that you're sending from. So there's nothing like sending money to the same account, things that don't make sense like that. It'll always gray out the option that you first chose. So here you can see Lake Speed is already grayed out. It's not an option as a recipient. It was a cool validation feature I figured I would mention.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that's actually very good. Well, in that case, that is really all the questions I have for you guys. Well done on your pre-2, guys. That's awesomely done.